of the President of the West Indian Foundation, and I'd like to thank everyone for being here this evening for this program on grants. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Fiona Vernal, who will be our moderator. And Fiona.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our grant writing workshop. Thank you for joining us. We have a very tight program, so I'm just going to jump right in. The purpose of this workshop is to provide common scenarios and requirements that you might encounter as you consider putting in a grant application. We have 3 speakers, so Ms. Haldane, who's president of the West Indian Foundation. We have Joan Barere, who's from the city of Hartford in the Office of the Director of Central Grants Administration and City Strategic Partnerships, and Wayne Benjamin, who brings his wealth of experience as the principal of Georgetown Associates, which is a consulting firm that works on project management, economic development, and urban planning. Wayne brings his experience as well from banking, as well as working for the city of Hartford. For those of you who are still attempting to work out your audio, can you please work it out while you're on mute? Because we are about to begin. I would like to start off with Ms. Haldane, and then we will turn to Ms. Barere and then Mr. Benjamin in that order. So Ms. Haldane, can you get us started? Violette, you muted yourself.
Sorry.
Yes.
I am going to be speaking today on the grant writing application process. And I am sharing my screen. Can you see it?
Yes. Can everyone see that? It should say basics.
Yes, basics. So in the grant writing application process, the first thing it's recommended that you do is research the organization that's providing the grant. And the reason for doing that is you don't want to spend your time applying for a grant that the organization does not support. So you need to understand the mission of the organization, the priorities, and their strategic objectives. Many times this information is on their website and it tells you, so you really have to align with that. The second thing you need to do is review the criteria for the grant. Most grants are for nonprofits, some are for profit, some are for both, and some will allow you, if you are a for-profit, but you have a fiscal sponsor, they will allow you to apply. So make sure you review the criteria for the grant. And also understand what type of grant you are applying for. Some of them are program grants, where these are grants that the company normally gives out or the foundation normally gives out. Sometimes they put out a request for a proposal where it's for a specific item and they're looking for a specific organization or business that can meet that. And sometimes it's just one time or emergency. In this time of COVID, there are a lot of one-time or emergency grants available that are being put out specifically to meet the community's needs in regards to COVID. And then you also need to understand what will the grant fund. Many will not fund an individual or capital improvements, which means like building reservations. Some will not fund scholarships. Some will not fund, activities that may be considered lobbying. And sometimes they may even limit how much you may spend on a specific category. For instance, they may say only 15% of this grant can be used for salaries and the rest has to be used for other things. So please do your research and understand the criteria for the grant and what it's asking for. Second thing I just want to briefly talk about is the application. There's normally 3 parts to the application. The first is about your organization. What's the mission of your organization, your strategic priorities, the background, what type of work have you been doing in the past, and the diversity of the board is one of the things that a lot of organizations are looking for now, because they feel that a diverse board will produce diverse ideas. The second thing and this is very important, is the scope of work. What do you want to do and who are you doing it for? And how will you get it done? This will have to tie into the criteria for the grant and the mission and the strategic plans of the organization or the funder. So a lot of times they will have to be aligned. And the other thing you have to understand is what is success? What are the outcomes and what are you measuring and how will you measure? Okay, and then the third part of the application, a lot of times will ask for a budget. The budget for the scope of work that you're doing, that you're applying for. They will ask for the organization's annual budget, and they may even ask for your tax returns the past 1 or 2 years. So if you are going to apply for a grant, please try to have your annual budget available, your proposed annual budget, and your tax returns available. And the third thing is the process. Read and answer all the questions on the applications. At the foundation, we get a lot of applications, and sometimes they're incomplete. If your application is incomplete, we bounce it back, or you may lose out on the opportunity. Then you have to be aware of all the deadlines and submissions. If you do get the grant, they will provide you with basically a contract, and it will list all the criteria that you have to meet because you are receiving this grant. So you might have to provide financial reporting once or twice a year. You may have to provide activities, the progress of the work you're doing, especially if the grant is a year's duration. Where are you at this time? Just so they can see that you are making progress. And then the third thing is to know your reporting criteria. So when you plan and track your work and activities, you are collecting the information that the organization is interested in receiving. That would have been this is part of your process and part of your application. So they might want to know the number of participants. They might want to know how you're spending the dollars when you submit your budget. You might have to do line items. So you should be tracking your money, the monies that are being spent to the line item budget that you submitted. And the other thing to consider is most applications are now online. So the times when you would print it out and write it and then mail it in or fax it or email it back, a lot of them you now input it directly into the computer and it goes there. You can save it and go back, but it's online. Some grants will require that you show how the monies were spent. They may ask for receipts or invoices, or you may have to have them available for audit. I think most of them, you will have to have them available for audit at least. And many organizations will not provide a grant more than 3 years because they want to know that whatever they're funding can become self-sustaining. They're giving you the money in hopes that whatever you do will be able to stand on its own over time. And normally that's like a 3-year window. So those are the high-level basics. And Fiona, will you take questions at the end?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Haldane. As questions arise during the presentation, please put them in the chat and then I will present them as they're relevant. Ms. Barere?
No, kind of good evening. I'm sorry, I'm late. No, I kind of missed.
Thank you.
Everyone,
Very happy to
please,
be here.
Everyone, please mute, except for the presenter.
Thank you for inviting me. I don't have a presentation for you to read through as I go. I thought I would just explain what the city has available right now in terms of grants and our activity and how it can be helpful to people in the community who are looking to develop or pursue a grant either through the city or with the city as partner. The first thing I would say is that the city is, it's a funder And you may know of us as a funder through things like the CDBG program or the Neighborhood Assistance Act program. But we also are a grant seeker, and every one of the departments in the city does some grant seeking as well. There are opportunities to partner with the city too, as well as applying for CDBG or NAA. I appreciated Ms. Haldane's presentation. There are some things that I don't have to share about the basic grant seeking, but I would say that it's really important to think about your eligibility and do the upfront, just as she said. I would suggest also think really carefully about what you fit in terms of whether you're a 501c3. Because if your organization is not yet a 501c3, there are a lot of funders, whether they be government or foundation, that are not going to want to do a grant directly to your organization. But we have a lot of small nonprofits in the city, and through the CDBG program, I really like to encourage people who have smaller programs and smaller, newer organizations to try to get funding through CDBG. And if you aren't yet a 501c3, you can do that by partnering with an organization that is. If you develop a program jointly and you apply jointly and your program is approved, you can start work on the kinds of things that you'd like to do before you've achieved 501c3 status. And I encourage people in the community to think about doing that. I also want to mention, I get a lot of calls from people all year round who are looking for grants. And even though the Office of Central Grants works mostly with the nonprofits in the community and mostly with Hartford-based nonprofits who are providing services in the city of Hartford, I also get a lot of calls from Hartford residents. And Central Grants, our office, doesn't officially work with residents or provide individual grants. And as Ms. Haldane said, there are a lot of limitations on what grants are available for. But I do find myself talking to a lot of individuals who are looking for grants either to purchase a home, so they're looking for down payment assistance, or to fix their homes. And I just want to mention, even though this is a little bit outside of the topic of this particular webinar, you can call the city through the Department of Development Services and look for funding for those purposes. And as well, there have been a lot, and since COVID, there have been a lot of small business grants that have become available, more now than there were before the virus. And they are one-time grants, but they're useful if you have a small business and you need to get tided over during this really difficult time. And a lot of people have been trying to take advantage of those. The city tries really hard to make funding available to organizations that might not otherwise be traditionally banked with the big banks that had a lot of the federal funding. So it's worth calling the Department of Development Services if you have questions about any of those things, and I know someone can help you. And I also encourage people to call 311 if you're not sure who to call, because they can tell you who, and they're very helpful on that topic. I wanted to go back and talk a little bit about preparation, because as Ms. Haldane said, and I agree with her, that's a really big thing in terms of how you can succeed in obtaining a grant. The title of this presentation was "What are funders looking for?" And I can tell you one of the key things that they are looking for is to know that you're thoroughly prepared and really know your own program when you're asking for funds. They don't necessarily want you to describe your need. If they want to know about need and they want statistics about the specific program, they'll tell you. Otherwise, presume that if they're offering the funds, they know there's a need. And what they really want to hear from you is they want to hear that you have a well thought out solution. And so that means that when an opportunity becomes available, you should jump on it right away. Don't wait for a long time until the deadline is closer. Work on it sooner. Read the proposal, the request for proposals really thoroughly. Make a really thorough list of every single thing that they're looking for. And as much as you can, if those things are things like support letters from partners, reach out as soon as you possibly can to give those partners enough time to prepare so that when you get to your deadline, you have all the pieces that you need. That's some of the most heartbreaking stuff that I see when people are submitting, is when they're looking for one attachment that somebody just forgot to do at the last minute. And if they're late, they're late. Often you can't extend a deadline. And so if there's something that's missing, that's a really important feature. It may seem like a small thing, but when you get to the end, every single little scrap of paper that they're asking for has to be there. The other item I would just like to say is that there is grant writer support and technical assistance through our office if you have a program that you might need it for. And I will just say grant writers are a great thing, but working with them requires that you really know your program and have all your facts. We are at Central Grants, we're happy to help you try to develop a grant if you have something in mind. If you want to apply to CDBG, we're happy to give you technical assistance all year round in figuring out exactly how to describe your program. But I will say that it's really, really important that you know your content. No one else is going to know your content the way you do, your program. And I'm happy to take any questions about any of this.
Thank you, Ms. Barere. Mr. Benjamin? You are still on mute, Mr. Benjamin. And again, if questions come up, please put them in the chat and then we will work them through at the end of Mr. Benjamin's presentation.
Good. Thank you so much for having me. And can you see me? Can you hear me?
Use your. Wait.
Can you hear me?
Say recording. I think I'm seeing the stuff, but I
Yes.
don't hear nothing.
Can you see my can you see my presentation?
Your presentation is on the screen.
Beautiful, thanks. Okay, thanks again for having me.
My laptop, 'cause I'm,
Okay.
well, it says grant funding application process.
Yep.
Yes.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you. All right. Thanks again for having me.
Huh?
Can you,
No. I don't know if it's because I'm on the phone with you. Oh, wait. I see something that said. Wait, hold on, because I see something that say.
Okay. All right. So I'll continue from here. Violette, are you sharing or do I have to move this around? Okay, great. Thanks. All right. So basically, Violette and
I can hear it.
Joan
please mute.
provided a broad strokes as far as the application process is concerned. What I did is to kind of take more of a macro view as far as how the grant application would be viewed from the funder's perspective. So from that vantage point, areas that I'm looking to speak about tonight would be the following: the funding types, the background for the entities or the companies, the goal and objectives or priorities, the project timeline for the grant, that is, key personnel, competitive analysis, and forecast, and the use of the actual funds. Moving on to the next slide.
Ms. Haldane, next slide.
Yeah. Good, thanks. So generally speaking, I basically identified that there are 4 different buckets, if you may, where you can get funding from. One would be through the corporate funding or grants from corporations. Another would be from the federal programs or through endowments. Another would be from private foundations or grants from that source. And then municipal, which basically is what Joan actually spoke to early on. So if I could go back and start from the beginning, as far as corporations are concerned, you have large corporations, maybe a Target, maybe a Walmart, Family Dollar, those are all organizations that actually, through their foundations, they provide grants to organizations that are eligible, specifically 501c3 companies. On the other hand, if you're looking at the federal government, there are also federal programs that are available and endowments that can also provide funding to corporations or to businesses where you can go in and tap those funds. Typical example, when you're looking at the government through the CDGB program, that would be available through the city, that an individual can work with the city in order to tap those funds for a project, maybe like a Betty, for example, Joan, or something like Urban Act through the state of Connecticut. That's another source that I'm thinking about. Private foundations, you're looking at typically a bank, or you can approach, and if your project qualifies, you certainly can tap funding from the Hartford, city, of course, we mentioned that before. Let's go back to the federal programs again. The big one here today would be through the SBA that Joan mentioned. The USDA would be another good source of getting funding, or the United Department of Agriculture, U.S. Department of Agriculture. EPA would be another good source for funding. Let's say, for example, someone is working on a project that has some environmental issues. They probably can work with a city, work with a municipality to get funding through that source. The FDA, the Food and Agriculture Department, or the big one here today would be NIH, the National Institute of Health. If you're big enough and your organization is one that it's catering, for example, the big thing today that is flourishing would be cannabis. So someone's looking to do some research in cannabis, here again, it's this picture thinking. That would possibly be a source of funding for a company that is looking to expand or business that's looking to get off the ground. SBIR is another big program. That's called the Small Business Innovation Research Program. But monies are available through the SBA, through that program, in order to help small businesses and also help in the research and development of various projects. So that's a big one, but this kind of gives you the general overview as to where the dollars are. Then, thank you, Violette. As far as the organizational background, the organization's background is concerned, clearly Violette and Joan spoke to this. For a non-for-profit, what they would be looking for from the funder side would be looking to see, listen, is this company registered? Is it a 501c3, or what exactly is the company's registration through the IRS? Company must also be registered with the state. And then you, of course, must have a tax ID. So this is all important. And if you don't have that, you're basically starting behind the 8 ball. Income tax filings must be current, must be up to date. All right, so there's many companies, for example, Joan made reference to the fact early on where funding was available through the state because of the COVID. Many companies could not apply because their filings for their taxes were not current. But it's important that we stress that your taxes must be current, meaning as far as tax filings. Number of years if someone already out of the shoe, last month, that if you register to say and the government today this last week, like early paper that are important. A lot of that is business is very important. And once that business is up and running, it's important that for some businesses, especially for example, through the Hartford public or organizations such as that, and it provides financial audits. This year would be outlined in the months. Doesn't exactly hear it. Side, the state industry administration. I'd like to know what is it corporation? Is it a so there's The other main point is your tax filing, as I mentioned before. Generally for a profit organization, they were making sure that your last 2 years tax returns are in place, so they'll be able to compare a trend, meaning over time, whether it is because of, that will actually provide a historic view, and this is looking backward rather than looking forward. For new businesses, they like to see your business plan, and they also like to see what the needs of the business are. Next slide, Violette. What is it the business is getting? What's the nature of the business? What problems are you looking to solve? And to see financials, and clearly Violette spoke to this early on. Besides your budget, I'd like to see exactly if it's an existing business or an existing company. I want to take a look at your balance sheet, which is going to show what you own and what you owe. I also want to see the cash flow statement and an income statement that's going to be providing your profit and your loss, or your profit or your losses, if any. Besides that, we were looking to see what programs you're providing. You know, is it something to solve teenage pregnancy? Is it a green initiative? Is it an early education or early childhood education? Or is it an after-school program? These are all important cutting-edge answers that you could be coming up to various problems that people may be having. Next slide, Violette. Here I kind of give a broad overview to say, listen, if you're looking to get in from the bottom up or just as a startup, this is some things that as a grant funder or someone who's looking to provide dollars would like to see exactly where in the business cycle is this new operation you're looking to come up with. Is it a startup? Is it, and that's the first column. Is it in the business in the growth stage? Is it in the expansion phase? Is it in the mature stage, or is it declining? Well, what I'm referring to here, for example, is classically, of course, we're looking at companies that are declining. Today we're talking about the Sears, the mature companies. We're talking about companies such as, or organizations, I should say, such as the Camp Current, for example. That's a classic one. So someone who's looking to get into that type of business, because funding is so competitive, it may be difficult for someone to do something like that. Versus someone who's looking to get into the green industry or the green initiative. That may be a growth company, and that may be more of where traction is, that dollars and opportunities may be for such companies. Okay, the next one, Violette. Thank you. So first of all, you would have to identify your goals, your priorities, and you're going to identify a problem, stating what exactly is the problem that the project is looking to address. With that, you'll have to, when you're going to look to get certain things done by when. You can clearly indicate and state what the objectives and what the outcomes are. And then at the end, you clearly would have to demonstrate what the accomplishments or what the achievables were of the various priorities that you set out to accomplish. And this will all be tied in to the scope that they're looking for once they kind of highlight that. With that, you develop a schedule saying what is going to be done by a certain time. And this is like putting on your project management hat here. So with that in mind, you're saying, hey, you're going to apply for the grant, let's say sometime the 1st of February, and you're hoping to get an answer by the 2nd of March. Then you're looking to assemble your team thereafter. And then at phase 1, you're looking, this is your implementation. This is the 3rd row. It says phase 1. So sometime towards the end of March, towards you know, the beginning of March, you're looking to get things going and rolling all the way into February. Then you're going to, during that time, you're doing your data analysis. And then in the final analysis, you'll submit your report, you do your closeout. But this is just a quick illustration. Nothing technical to this, but this is just trying to provide you a basis as to how you'll approach getting this done. Next slide. Then key to this entire process is the funder is looking to see who is on your team, key members of the management team, or who's going to execute this grant. You know, here I just kind of quickly took a stab of some folks saying you're going to have a manager, you're going to have the owner, you're going to mention other key employees. Just a quick overview just to show you that these are all important components that the funder would be looking at. Who is executing? Who is going to be on the ground every day? What is their experience? And this all would lead to you getting much, much more, bang for your buck. Okay. In addition to that, what you're looking at is the funder would also be looking to do a comparative analysis to see exactly how things are, what is going on with other companies in that industry, and how are they performing. We'll just kind of give you a quick snapshot, meaning you're in the restaurant business, so you're looking at Don Pizza, Wilson's Pizza, some names that you're familiar with, of course, Little Caesars or Mr. Pizza, and to see exactly how those companies are working and how they're doing compared to how your organization is doing. And in the final analysis, once you're applying for the funds or grant, they like to see exactly how the funds are going to be utilized. So there's generally something that bankers and grant folks who are looking to funders would like to see exactly a sheet that you would have to prepare within your budget or within your business plan. What are your sources and uses? So in this case, to just give you an example, that 8% would be going for miscellaneous, another 2% for website development. Here again, this is just a quick example. 28% for working capital, X number of percentage for marketing, equipment, and so on and so forth. And here again, this is pretty much of a high level view, and wanted to kind of give you a clear insight as to how the funder now would be looking to evaluate. And this is what I basically do, sitting on the various boards. Yeah, and I think you have another one. Yeah. So with that, then you will have a forecast. Hey, here is what my sales are going to be. Here is what I'm anticipating bringing in. Here is where my cost is going to be. And you provide something like this just to show, listen, at the end of the day, you're going to break even. Are you going to have a net profit? Are you going to have a loss? And what's going to be the trend going forward? Are you going to be increasing? Or are you going to be decreasing or over time? So I hope this kind of gives you a good insight as to, how this is done from the funder's standpoint. And with that, I'll answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all of our presenters. I wonder if we could start by having each of you explain a bit about what are some of the most common hurdles that come up for community-based organizations like the audience that we have tonight. I know Ms. Barere said that one of the most common problems is that a piece of the application might be missing, and then you end up missing the deadline. What are some of the other common hurdles that come up for the specific kinds of organizations that are in this audience tonight? Ms. Haldane, can we start with you?
Sure. Incomplete information. The form comes in and maybe you're supposed to have your tax ID number on it or an address, or something is missing. So a lot of times the applications are incomplete, or the follow-up work that needs to be delivered at a specific time comes in and it's not fully complete, which means we either have to go back and ask for that information for you to resubmit, or, normally that's what we've been doing, but some other places may just, say you're not meeting the requirements.
Right, at the level of corporate especially, that you are simply going to miss the deadline. They're not going to chase you unless your paperwork is missing 6 weeks or 8 weeks before the deadline. But if your paperwork is usually missing after the deadline, you're probably going to have to miss that cycle. Ms. Barere? I think she's frozen until she gets,
Am I?
there you are. You were, but now you're not.
Okay. I think the biggest, there are a lot of small hurdles that come out of one thing. And the one thing that I would say that's really critical is alignment to the purpose of the application. And that can play itself out by, this application that you think is good for your organization, but you don't really try to fit into the application because you have a program in mind that you want them to fund. They may not be aligned, or you may not have thought through exactly how you're going to demonstrate to them how you're going to meet their requirements, because the funder is out there putting the money out because they want to see outcomes achieved by organizations. And the core of a really great application is that you thought through that program really deeply, and you have answers to all the questions, even some that they haven't asked, so that when it comes to finding all the small pieces or figuring out exactly how you're going to express something, or even being on time, you don't have to work as hard because you have a specific program that you thought through well. If that piece is missing, believe me, the funder can tell. Decided, oh, we're going to apply for this even though it isn't perfect because we really have this need and we're just going to do it. If you don't have a great fit, I would say don't waste your capacity on pursuing that grant. Find one that fits you better, because the funder is going to see that immediately and they're not going to be swayed. They really want to see a good fit, and that requires a lot of preparation.
Mr. Benjamin?
Just putting on my banker's hat, because I have an eye for the numbers. I'm always looking to make sure that the sources and uses that I just mentioned is always lining up. If, for example, someone, not having those aligned, then I would have a problem with it. But besides that, it's a matter of folks, having their scope clearly spelled out and their schedule also to say, hey, listen, here's what we're going to do, and here's how it's going to be accomplished in X number of time.
In terms of capacity development, if you are dealing with organizations that's mostly an all volunteer staff and they do not have a grant writer or anyone with grant writing capacity for their volunteer staff or their membership, how would you advise these kinds of organizations to go about engaging in the grant seeking and grant writing process?
I'll take a shot at that. There are some organizations, and specifically schools, UConn, for example, comes to mind. They have the law school there, where they probably can utilize volunteer students or students for internship. That can certainly assist with that need. Another way you probably can accomplish that is to bill a cost, and Joan can speak to that also, whereby you can pay a grant writer or a consultant, and you can include that cost in the grant. So those are two, possible avenues that you can utilize in order to secure those resources in order to complete the application and to take you through the entire grant process.
I would like to say about that there are a few grants available where they'll actually ask you if you're asking them to fund your grant writer. Those are few and far between. The one that comes to mind immediately is FEMA, but they do that mostly for the fire grants. So those are grants that are only available to fire departments. But it's occasionally done because they recognize that those organizations may be largely volunteer, especially in rural areas. And so they're looking to try to provide additional levels of capacity. What we run across here in the city is that there are a lot of wonderful smaller organizations that are trying to do great work in the community and that just maybe have one or two paid staff, and a lot of the work is volunteer. And those one or two staff are really, really busy, and they don't have the kind of time that they need to do good grant writing, which takes a lot of time and attention and focus. And we try to work with people to provide technical assistance when we have a grant opportunity open at the city. So you can come in and see us as long as it's not officially open yet and say, how should I pursue this? What ideas do you have for me? One of the ideas that I often suggest to smaller organizations is that they learn the ropes by partnering with another organization in the community with which they partner anyway, partner on a grant, and learn from an organization that's done a little bit more of it, how you go about doing and pursuing a grant. That's one thing that you can do. You can look for volunteer assistance from law students. I think that's a really nice idea. But I think that the interns and the students can't really provide the kind of level of grant writing experience that you really want to see for your organization usually. It means that you still have to work really hard on the content yourself. So I would say partner when you start out. Partner a lot, collaborate with people in the community and learn from them. I wish I could say that the Hartford Foundation was still doing those really basic trainings on things like this. They do some nonprofit support work, but it tends to be around the more sophisticated activities, like how you can do different sorts of outcome measurement and things like that. I wish that they were providing a more basic grant writing assistance that they used to do. And I really wish our office had more time to do that. But you can always call us and ask for help, and we'll do whatever we can to give you a hand. And even suggest that you partner with someone that the city departments are working with. We've done a couple of grants recently that involve community organizations as partners with city departments, and they worked out pretty well.
In the chat, there is a request that we put some of the names of the common websites where those who are interested can apply for grants. And then a second question, that if you don't have a 501c3, but you're a nonprofit organization, how would that affect you applying for a grant?
I can say that you can partner with a 501c3 and they can be your fiduciary. And so it's a partnership relationship. You work together to complete the grant. They submit the grant on your behalf, and they are taking on the financial responsibility, and they would dispense the funds. So that's one way that you can apply for many of the grants that require a 501c3. And a lot of times the applications will tell you if you can have a fiduciary, if you can use a financial fiduciary in the application process.
Another question that I have for all of the presenters is, if you're an organization and you don't have any kind of footprint, you haven't had a municipal grant, a corporate grant, a private foundation grant, or any kind of corporate grants, what would be a good first step for that organization to begin to establish that footprint? As a grant writer myself, one of the things that I have found is that success is usually rewarded. Once you've gotten a grant the first time, it's actually easier to keep on getting grants. So it's getting that first grant. So if you're one of those organizations who you were small, you're a volunteer organization, you were meeting very basic needs, but now you realize you need to be more nimble and step into this space, what would be a good first outing for grant seeking?
Well, I'll say,
okay.
Let me just invite people with smaller organizations to try to apply for a community development block grant with the city. We have grants that range, when they're awarded, the smallest will be $4,000 or $5,000, and the largest are $100,000 or more. Those smaller grants often go to new applicants, and we really work hard at that every year to make sure that it's not just all the same old folks. And the last several years, we've had good turnover. Out of 50 grants a year, probably 10 of them are new. So, and some of those organizations are small, and you can come in and ask for technical assistance and we'll help you. And some of those organizations, because people know they're doing good work in the community, their applications do well.
Yeah.
Mr. Benjamin?
Yeah, I like to second that. That's a good approach, working with the city and going through the CDGB program. And I can tell you organizations such as I mentioned them before, the Camp Current, Knox Foundation, I believe would be another one that you work with closely, Joan.
Yeah.
Even the Ebony Horsewomen, those are
Yes.
good organizations that have partners with the various NRZs in securing those letters of credit not letters of credit, here again, I got my banker's hat, letters of support from the various community groups in order to assist them to show that they're doing good work in the area. That certainly help your cause, and that's a very good way to kind of get your name out there and get recognized in order to get the assistance that is needed.
All right, thank you. So what if you find the process absolutely and completely bewildering? We know that there are grants, especially with the city, but if you're one of those organizations that finds the process overwhelming and bewildering, you call 311, you get connected with a representative from the community block grant. Can you give us an example of what that experience might be after you've been connected with somebody in that grant line? Joan?
So our application process starts with a meeting, with a public meeting. And so what'll happen is if it's early in the season before we've actually released the grant application, and you can get connected to us, we'll just tell you when the community meeting is. And we encourage everyone who's even thinking about applying to come to that meeting. It's a really good idea to do it because we provide an enormous amount of information about the application. We practically walk you through it so that you're on the same playing field with all of the organizations that have seen it before. And you have an opportunity to ask questions. And you also have an opportunity there to form relationships with people in the office, the project managers who are handling the program, who you can talk to about any of your technical questions throughout the process. And we try to be as available as we can by phone and by internet. Through COVID, we haven't been as available by phone, I have to say. So I'm hoping that when we open our next series of applications in January, we'll be in a better place and we'll be able to have an in-person meeting as usual. Because I think that that's an extremely valuable way to get started. The city has also upgraded its website, and our webpage is still under development, but Central Grants will have a very comprehensive page that has a lot of information on how to access the applications and the documents so that you don't find it mystifying. It shouldn't be hard. You download the document and it should be. And if it's bewildering, then we're not doing our job.
I'd like to add a couple things. Most organizations, I find, if you call and ask about the application, they will answer your specific question. And some organizations, before you're even allowed to complete an application, they may require you submit a concept paper. Basically, this is what your idea is, and this is what I think it's going to cost, and some basic information. And then they will have a discussion with you about your concept paper. And through that discussion, you get a better idea of what they're looking for, and they get a better idea of what you're proposing. And if that discussion goes well, then you are invited to actually apply for a grant. And so that's another way of getting the information to fill out a grant. But I have found that most organizations, as Ms. Jones said, before the actual application is due, they will answer questions. You read a question you don't understand, it's not clear to you. If you call and ask and say, this, can you give me an example of what this means, etc. They will support you and provide that information, because I do think they want people to be successful when they are applying.
Yeah, just to add to that real quick, it's a case where both of what Joan and Violette kind of made reference to, I think is true. And most of that information can be found on the website. And these are folks who are dedicated to be doing solely grants and grant writing and grant responses. And it's a case where these organizations or institutions are eager to get these dollars out. And in many instances, they're tied to their fiscal year. So if they do not have those funds out, it's a bad reflection on the company. So once you call those organizations or even you email them, from what I found, whether it's dealing with the banks or the various foundations, matter of fact, or I'm going to write this one until it's over, Walmart or Target, it's within your area and what you're looking to do would serve their purpose. I find them to be very responsive.
Ms. Barere, the community block grant next season is January. Are the past calls a good model for those on this call to check out what the call looked like last year so that they could try to prepare for the coming RFP in January?
Well, I would say that if you're interested, if anyone's interested, they can get in touch with my office, and I keep copies of the prior applications and the prior instructions, and also the PowerPoint that we use for the informational meeting. And anybody who wants them can access them. I can send them to you. And if you want to talk about them and you have questions, I'm happy to answer them. I will say, I am very tempted this year, because the technology is becoming available to us, to try to take the entire application process online into a portal. I don't know if I'm going to have the staff capacity to generate that this year. So it may still be on paper in coming January, but we're hoping that we're going to get a more of the kind of portal look that you would have with some of the corporate foundations. Which will make it easier for people, because then they can just go online, open it up, and answer the questions. It's my goal. But right now, the content will be pretty much the same regardless.
All right. And then it opens in January, and what's the deadline for that season?
It's usually a 5 to 6 week open period. So we try to have the informational by, say, probably before the middle of January. And we try to have all of the applications in before the end of February.
Right. I would say that for many of the organizations that's on this call, that's not going to be enough time, especially if they're obeying the preparation part of the advice. Is it possible for us to have a copy of last year's application and then distribute it to the folks who are on this call, rather than have them have to approach your office?
No reason why not. Tell me where you'd like me to send it, and I will send you copies of everything, and you can circulate them. It's fine.
Thank you. I am a stickler for time, and it is 8:59. As the moderator of this panel, I will be providing a written synopsis of this call, and I will be distributing it through the West Indian Foundation via email. If you do not receive it in the next 2 days, I am going to put my information in the chat here. This is my email. I'm going to send my email to everyone. So if you happen to not be on our distribution list, I'm trying to talk and write at the same time. It's FionaVernal@gmail.com. My computer won't let me type for a minute. So I will get you a synopsis of this call with the major pointers, and I will contact Ms. Barere and get a copy of last year's community block grant, and we will distribute that to you. If there are any further questions to follow up to this meeting, please don't hesitate to contact me. As well, I will be the point person for this particular follow-up. Does anyone have any last-minute question as we head to our conclusion.
Dr. Vernal, it's not so much a question, but to let you know that we have also recorded this session.
Yes.
So the intent is to have it up on our website so that people can go back and listen to it a second time, and we can create a foundation for hopefully a group of grant writers in the community. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Benjamin, Ms. Haldane, Ms. Barere. We really appreciate your assistance. And when you see the flood of applications coming through the city, you will know that it was as a follow-up to this particular workshop. Thank you to all of the attendants for your attention. And I'm going to sign off at my duties and let Ms. Haldane say farewell.
Thank you. Could the core team stay on the call for a little bit? Just the core team?
Okay. All right. Bye now.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.